The seat that wasn't there. I stood in the doorway, clutching the warm dish of pumpkin pie I'd spent hours perfecting, the kind Lila used to beg for as a child. The table was set, glowing under the chandelier, laughter spilling from the dining room. But something was wrong. I counted the chairs. 1, 2, 3, 4. Exactly enough for them, none for me. Chris's voice echoed in my head, cold and sharp. Thanksgiving is kind of just for real family, you know? 15 years of raising them, and I was the outsider in my own home. I stayed quiet, not because I had no choice. I was waiting. Welcome to the Betrayal Revenge channel, where stories come alive through voices you've never heard told this way before. Join us for a tale of loyalty tested and justice reclaimed. It all began 3 months ago, on a rainy afternoon in Vermont. I'll never forget. The rain tapped against the kitchen window, a soft, relentless rhythm that matched the ache in my chest. I stood at the counter, my hands dusted with flour, the scent of cinnamon and nutmeg curling through the air. The pumpkin pie was cooling on the rack, its golden crust perfect, just the way Lila loved it. I'd made it for her every Thanksgiving since she was 10, back when she'd sneak into the kitchen and steal spoonfuls of filling, giggling as I pretended to scold her. That was years ago, before Malcolm passed, before the house grew quieter, before I became, what? A ghost in my own life? I'm Valerie Walker, 63, with silver hair that turned early and eyes that have seen too much. For 15 years I've been a mother, not by blood but by choice, to Chris and Lila, Malcolm's children from his first marriage. I raised them through fevers, heartbreaks, and late-night talks, all while keeping this old Vermont house alive with the smell of fresh bread and the warmth of routine. Leo, our scruffy mutt, was my shadow, his soft snores a comfort in the lonely evenings. But 3 years ago, after Malcolm's death, something shifted. The kids stopped inviting me to Thanksgiving. "We're keeping it small," Chris would say, his voice clipped. Lila would nod, avoiding my eyes. I let it go. I always let it go. This year, though, I couldn't. Maybe it was the way the leaves turned crimson, reminding me of the scarf Malcolm gave me on our first Thanksgiving together. Maybe it was the weight of too many silent nights. I called Chris, my voice steady despite the tremor in my heart. "I'd like to join you for Thanksgiving this year," I said. The line went quiet for a moment too long. Then, his voice, cool and distant, "Thanksgiving is kind of just for real family, you know?" The words landed like a slap, sharp and stinging. Real family. I wanted to ask what 15 years of tucking them in, of bandaging scraped knees, of crying with them when their father died had meant. But I didn't. I swallowed the hurt, let it settle deep in my chest, and said, "I'll bring Lila's favorite pie." He didn't argue. The day of the dinner, I dressed carefully, my best sweater, the one Malcolm said made my eyes look like the sea. I brushed my hair, pinned it back, and checked the pie one last time. The house smelled of cloves and memories. Leo whined at my feet, his tail thumping against the floor. "Not this time, boy," I whispered, scratching his ears. I wrapped the pie in a cloth, grabbed my coat, and stepped into the drizzle. The drive to Chris's place was short, the Vermont hills cloaked in mist. His house, Malcolm's old family home, stood at the end of a gravel road, its windows glowing gold against the gray afternoon. I parked, my hands trembling as I gripped the steering wheel. For a moment, I sat there, the pie warm in my lap, the rain pattering on the windshield. What was I doing here? I'd raised these children, loved them as my own, but that phrase, real family, clawed at me. I pushed the thought away and stepped out, the gravel crunching under my boots. The front door was ajar, laughter spilling out. I knocked softly, then pushed it open. The dining room was alive with light, candles flickering, the chandelier casting a warm glow over the table. Chris stood at the head, pouring wine. Lila was arranging napkins, her dark hair catching the light. Miranda, their mother, was there too, her presence like a shadow I couldn't shake. She'd reappeared in their lives a few years ago, after abandoning them as kids. And then there was a cousin I barely knew, chatting loudly. The table was set for 4. 4 plates, 4 glasses, 4 chairs. My breath caught. Valerie! Lila's voice was bright, but her smile didn't reach her eyes. You brought the pie. She took the dish from my hands, her fingers brushing mine, and set it on the counter. Come in, it's freezing out there. I stepped inside, the warmth of the house wrapping around me. The air smelled of roasted turkey and sage, but there was something else. A faint floral perfume, sharp and unfamiliar. Miranda's, I realized, catching her glance from across the room. She wore a silk scarf, one I recognized instantly. It was mine, a gift from Malcolm, tucked away in a drawer years ago. My stomach twisted, but I forced a smile. Where should I sit? I asked, my voice lighter than I felt. Chris looked up, his brow furrowing for a split second before he gestured vaguely toward the kitchen. Oh, you can hang out in there for now, he said. It's easier to keep an eye on the oven, you know? We've got everything set here. I froze. The kitchen. Not the table, not with them. The kitchen where the linoleum was cracked and the light flickered. I glanced at the dining table again, counting the chairs in my head. 1, 2, 3, 4. No room for me. My throat tightened, but I nodded. Of course, I said, my voice steady. I'll check the oven. I walked into the kitchen, the pie still warm in its dish, now sitting abandoned on the counter. The oven hummed, the turkey inside sizzling faintly. I stood there, my hands clasped, the chatter from the dining room washing over me. Lila's laugh, Chris's low voice, Miranda's silky tone. They were a family, complete without me. I pressed my fingers against the cool countertop, willing the ache in my chest to fade. 15 years. I'd sewn costumes for Lila's school plays, driven Chris to soccer practice, stayed up late helping with homework. I'd loved them fiercely, even when it hurt. And now I was relegated to the kitchen like a hired cook. I could still see them through the doorway, their faces lit by candlelight. Miranda raised a glass, her scarf catching the glow. My scarf, my place, my family. Something sharp stirred in me, not anger, not yet, but a quiet, nagging doubt. Had I been replaced, piece by piece, without anyone bothering to tell me? I reached into my coat pocket, my fingers brushing against my phone. I don't know why I did it. Instinct, maybe, or the need to hold on to something real. I pressed record, the tiny red light blinking in the dimness of the kitchen. I didn't speak. I didn't move. But for the first time, I felt the weight of my silence shift. I wasn't just waiting anymore. A toast with no name. The kitchen light flickered above me, casting jagged shadows on the cracked linoleum. I stood there, my hands still dusted with the scent of cinnamon from the pie, listening to the laughter from the dining room. It was warm, vibrant, the kind of sound that used to fill this house when Malcolm was alive. But now, it felt like a wall, separating me from the family I'd poured my heart into. Chris's words still burned in my mind. Thanksgiving is kind of just for real family, you know? I wanted to believe he didn't mean it, that it was just a slip of the tongue. But the table set for 4, no chair for me, told a different story. Something was wrong, but I couldn't pin it down. Not yet. I smoothed my sweater, took a deep breath, and stepped back into the dining room. The air was thick with the aroma of roasted turkey, sage, and that sharp floral perfume that clung to Miranda. She sat at the head of the table, her silk scarf, my scarf, draped elegantly over her shoulders. The sight of it twisted something in my chest, but I kept my face neutral. Lila was passing a bowl of mashed potatoes, her smile bright but fleeting when she glanced my way. Chris poured wine, his movements precise like he was performing for an audience. The cousin, whose name I could never remember, was mid-story, gesturing wildly. They hadn't noticed me yet. "Valerie, you're still here." Lila's voice cut through the chatter, a little too cheerful. "The pie smells amazing. You should sit somewhere." Her eyes darted to the table, then away, as if she'd just realized there was no place for me. "I'm fine," I said, forcing a smile. "Just checking on things." I lingered at the edge of the room, my hands clasped, feeling like an uninvited guest in a house I'd scrubbed and loved for 15 years. The chandelier glowed above, its light catching the crystal glasses, making them sparkle. Everything looked perfect. Too perfect. Chris raised his glass, clearing his throat. "Before we dig in," he said, his voice carrying that polished tone he used at work, I want to say a few words." The table quieted, all eyes on him. I leaned against the doorway, my heart thudding. Maybe this was it. Maybe he'd acknowledge me. The years I'd spent raising them, the pie I'd made because Lila loved it. Maybe I'd been wrong to doubt. "This Thanksgiving," Chris began, his gaze sweeping the room, "I'm grateful for the people who've shaped us, who've been there through it all, to the mother who raised us, who made us who we are today." He paused, lifting his glass higher, and his eyes settled, not on me but on Miranda. She smiled, a slow, knowing curve of her lips, and raised her glass in return. The cousin clapped, Lila nodded, and the room erupted in a soft chorus of, "Hear, hear." I felt the air leave my lungs. The mother who raised them? Miranda, who'd left them when Chris was barely 6, who'd sent postcards instead of showing up, who'd drifted back into their lives only after Malcolm was gone. My throat burned, but I didn't move. I couldn't. My eyes locked on that scarf, the one Malcolm had given me, now draped over her like a trophy. I remembered the day he'd tied it around my neck, his fingers gentle, his voice warm. "It suits you, Val." Now it was hers, and so it seemed was my place. I forced myself to breathe, to keep my face calm. I wanted to scream, to demand why they were rewriting history, but I didn't, not yet. Instead, I watched. Miranda's smile widened as she sipped her wine, her fingers brushing the scarf. Lila glanced at me, her expression faltering for a split second before she looked away. Chris didn't even notice me standing there. The cousin laughed at something Miranda said, oblivious to the storm brewing in my chest. I stepped back into the kitchen, my hands trembling. The pie sat on the counter, untouched, its crust still perfect. I pressed my palms against the cool granite, trying to anchor myself. 15 years of memories flashed through my mind. Lila's first piano recital, Chris's graduation, the nights I'd sat up with them when Malcolm was sick. Had it all been erased? Had Miranda slipped back into their lives so seamlessly that I'd become invisible? I heard footsteps and turned to see Lila in the doorway, holding an empty platter. "Need help with anything?" she asked, her voice soft, almost guilty. "No," I said, my tone sharper than I meant. "I'm fine." She hesitated, then nodded and retreated to the dining room. I caught a glimpse of the fireplace as she passed, and my heart sank further. A new photo hung above the mantel, a family portrait, all smiles, with Chris, Lila, Miranda, and the cousin. I wasn't in it. The frame I'd chosen years ago, the one that held a picture of all of us with Malcolm, was gone. The clink of glasses drew me back to the present. They were toasting again, their voices a blur. I edged closer to the doorway, staying in the shadows. Leo, who'd been curled up near the table, lifted his head, his ears twitching. He'd always been my shadow, following me from room to room, but now he was at Miranda's feet. She reached down, scratching his ears with a familiarity that made my skin crawl. Leo wagged his tail, content. Even my dog. I felt a bitter laugh bubble up, but I swallowed it. The room spun for a moment, the candlelight blurring into streaks of gold. I gripped the doorframe, steadying myself. They were moving on without me, piece by piece. My scarf, my dog, my place in their story. But why? Why now, after all these years? I slipped my hand into my coat pocket, my fingers brushing the phone still recording. The red light blinked, steady and silent, capturing every word, every laugh. I didn't know what I'd do with it yet, but it felt like a lifeline, a way to hold on to the truth when everything else was slipping away. The dinner continued, the clatter of plates and forks filling the air. I stayed in the kitchen, pretending to check the oven, but my mind was racing. Miranda's voice carried over the noise, smooth and confident, telling a story about a recipe she'd perfected. I froze. It was my recipe, my mother's, passed down through years of Thanksgivings, the one I'd taught Lila when she was 12. The one they were eating now, in a bowl of creamy pumpkin soup. No one mentioned my name. No one even looked my way. The dog that didn't bark. The kitchen felt like a cage, its dim, flickering bulb casting long shadows across the linoleum floor. I stood frozen, my hands still warm from the pie dish, now abandoned on the counter. The laughter from the dining room sliced through the air. Chris's deep chuckle, Lila's soft giggle, Miranda's smooth, practiced cadence. They were a family complete, their voices weaving a tapestry that excluded me. My pumpkin pie, Lila's favorite, sat untouched, its cinnamon scent mocking me. Chris's words echoed in my head. Thanksgiving is kind of just for real family, you know. But it wasn't just his words. It was the table set for 4, Miranda wearing my scarf, and now the final blow. Leo, my loyal companion, curled at her feet instead of mine. Was there anything left in this house that still belonged to me? I slipped my hand into my coat pocket, my fingers brushing the phone still recording. The tiny red light blinked, steady and silent, the only thing that seemed to see me. I didn't know what I was capturing. Laughter, lies, or the slow unraveling of my place in this family. But I couldn't stop. Not now. The dining room glowed with candlelight, a perfect scene I was no longer part of. Something was wrong, terribly wrong, but I couldn't name it yet. The rain outside had softened, leaving the air heavy with damp earth. I moved to the sink, rinsing a glass just to keep my hands busy. The clink of silverware and the hum of conversation filled the house, but it felt distant, like a memory I wasn't allowed to touch. Miranda's voice rose above the rest, recounting a story about a Thanksgiving long ago. I caught fragments. The kids were so little. We laughed until midnight, and my stomach twisted. She was rewriting their childhood, painting herself as the mother who'd never left. I wanted to storm in, to remind them of the nights I'd stayed up with Chris during his fevers, or the mornings I'd braided Lila's hair for school. But I stayed still, my reflection in the dark window staring back at me, silver hair, tired eyes, a woman who'd given everything and gotten nothing. I needed air. I slipped out the back door, the cool Vermont night wrapping around me like a shroud. The grass was slick under my boots, the drizzle clinging to my sweater. "Leo," I whispered, whistling softly. He always came running, his scruffy fur brushing my legs, his eager bark a comfort. But the yard was silent. "Leo, come on, boy," I called again, louder, my voice swallowed by the mist. Nothing. My chest tightened. He'd been with Miranda earlier, hadn't he? I'd seen her scratching his ears, her fingers casual, possessive. Where was he now? I circled the house, my boots sinking into the mud, the cold seeping through my clothes. The dining room windows glowed, framing the family inside, Chris pouring wine, Lila passing a platter, Miranda gesturing animatedly. No Leo. I checked the porch, the shed, the old oak tree where he liked to nap. My calls grew sharper, more desperate. "Leo!" The silence mocked me, heavy and wrong. My pulse raced. He never wandered far, not without me. Something wasn't right. I pushed back into the house, wiping my boots on the mat. The warmth hit me, but it felt suffocating, laced with that floral perfume that screamed Miranda. I stepped into the dining room, my breath uneven. The chatter stopped, all eyes turning to me. Miranda tilted her head, her scarf, my scarf, catching the light. "Valerie, you look like you've seen a ghost," she said, her smile thin, almost amused. "Leo's gone," I said, my voice steady despite the panic clawing at me. "I've looked everywhere. He's not in the yard, not on the porch. He's just gone." Chris set down his glass, his brow furrowing. "Gone? He was right here an hour ago." His tone was sharp, like I'd ruined his perfect evening. "You were supposed to be watching him, weren't you?" I stared at him, the boy I'd raised, now accusing me. "I wasn't with him," I said, my voice low, deliberate. "Miranda was. She took him out this afternoon." The words hung in the air, heavy and pointed. Miranda's smile faltered, her eyes narrowing to slits. "Me?" she said, her voice rising, a touch too theatrical. "I brought him back hours ago, Valerie. Don't pin this on me. Maybe if you weren't so distracted filming your little videos or whatever it is you do, you'd have noticed him slip out." Her words were a blade, sharp and mocking. "Videos? I didn't even own a camera beyond my phone." The cousin snorted, and Lila looked down, her fingers twisting her napkin. I felt the room shrink, their gazes pressing against me. "I don't film anything," I said, my voice tight. "And I know you were with him, Miranda. You were the last one to see him." Chris stood, his chair scraping the floor. "Enough!" he snapped. "Valerie, why do you always make everything a problem? Leo's probably fine, but if he's not, it's on you. You're the one who's supposed to care about him." His words hit harder than I expected, each one a reminder of my place, or lack of it. Supposed to care. As if I hadn't fed Leo every morning, brushed his fur, sat with him through storms when no one else bothered. Lila's voice broke the tension, soft and cutting. "Valerie, honestly," she said, not meeting my eyes, "Leo's been different lately. He's been sticking to Mom more. He seems happier with her." Mom, Miranda. The word was a knife, twisting deep. I looked at Lila, searching for the girl who'd once clung to me, but she was gone, her face a mask of loyalty to someone else. Even Leo, my constant, had chosen Miranda. The room spun, the candlelight blurring into streaks. I wanted to scream, to tell them how I'd walked Leo every dawn, how he'd slept at my feet when Malcolm died, how he'd been my anchor when they all pulled away. But my throat closed, the words trapped. I felt their eyes, Chris's anger, Miranda's smugness, Lila's guilt, pinning me in place. I was the outsider, the problem, the one who'd lost their dog. "I'll look again," I said, my voice barely audible. I turned, my boots heavy as I stepped back into the night. The rain had stopped, but the air was thick, the stars hidden behind clouds. I called for Leo, my voice cracking, but the silence was deafening. My phone was still recording, capturing the emptiness. I pulled it out, opened a note, and typed with shaking fingers. "Miranda took Leo this afternoon. She says she brought him back. But did she?" I saved it, my breath hitching. It wasn't proof, but it was something, a thread to hold on to when everything else was slipping. Back inside, the dinner was winding down. Miranda was stacking plates, her movements graceful, like she'd always belonged here. Chris was scrolling on his phone, Lila staring at her lap. No one mentioned Leo. No one asked if I was okay. The pie sat on the counter, its crust still perfect, ignored. I grabbed my coat, my hands moving slowly, deliberately. I didn't say goodbye. I didn't need to. They wouldn't notice I was gone. The Will and the Forgotten Clause. The Vermont night pressed against the windows of my car, the air thick with the scent of wet leaves and regret. I drove away from Chris's house, the glow of their Thanksgiving fading in the rearview mirror. My hands gripped the steering wheel, knuckles white, the hum of the engine a low counterpoint to the storm in my chest. Leo was gone. My place at the table was gone. Even the scarf Malcolm gave me, now draped over Miranda's shoulders, was gone. Chris's accusation, "You had one job, watch the dog," echoed in my mind, sharp as a blade. Lila's soft betrayal, calling Miranda Mom, cut deeper still. 15 years of raising them, and I was nothing, just a shadow they'd swept aside. But as the road stretched before me, something shifted. The ache in my heart hardened into something colder, clearer. I wasn't done yet. I pulled into the driveway of my house, Malcolm's old family home where I'd raised the kids, where Leo's empty bed still sat by the hearth. The rain had stopped, leaving the air heavy, the stars hidden behind clouds. I sat in the car for a moment, my breath fogging the windshield. My phone was still in my coat pocket, still recording, capturing hours of their laughter, their lies. I didn't listen to it. Not yet. Instead, I closed my eyes, letting the memories flood in, Malcolm's warm hands tying that scarf around my neck, his voice soft. "You're my home, Val." Had he known even then how fragile that home would become? Inside, the house was too quiet, the kind of silence that presses against your skin. I kicked off my boots, the mud caking their soles, and dropped my coat over a chair. The living room smelled of old wood and faintly of Leo's fur, a scent that made my throat tighten. His water bowl sat untouched by the kitchen door, a faint ring of dust around it. I sank onto the couch, my hands trembling. I'd spent years keeping this place alive, polishing the oak table where Chris did his homework, mending the curtains Lila tore playing hide-and-seek. And for what? To be told I wasn't real family? To lose even my dog? I don't know what made me do it. Maybe it was the weight of their betrayal. Maybe it was the need to reclaim something, anything. I stood and walked to the study, a small room Malcolm used to call his thinking den. The air was stale, the shelves lined with his old law books and files. I hadn't touched his desk since he died, hadn't wanted to disturb the ghost of him that lingered there. But tonight, I needed answers. I opened the top drawer, my fingers brushing against pens, paper clips, a faded photo of us at Lila's 10th birthday. Beneath it was a manila envelope, its edges yellowed, labeled in Malcolm's neat handwriting, "Last Will and Testament." My breath caught. I'd seen the will before, years ago, when Malcolm walked me through it after his diagnosis. "It's simple, Val," he'd said, his hand squeezing mine. "The house, the savings, everything goes to you and the kids as long as you keep the family together." I'd nodded, trusting him, trusting them. But now, with Chris's words and Miranda's smugness burning in my mind, I needed to see it again. I slid the envelope onto the desk, my hand steady despite the tremor in my chest. The paper crackled as I opened it, the words blurring for a moment under the dim lamplight. I read slowly, tracing each line. The house, the land, the savings, all left to me with portions for Chris and Lila upon my death or their 30th birthdays, whichever came first. But there, tucked in a clause I'd barely noticed before, was something else. A condition, written in Malcolm's precise legalese. Should the family fail to uphold the tradition of Thanksgiving as a unified gathering, as defined by the inclusion of all members who have served as primary caregivers for a period exceeding 10 years, the estate shall revert solely to the surviving spouse, Valerie Walker, to be distributed at her discretion. I read it again, then a third time, my pulse quickening. 10 years. Malcolm had died 9 years ago. The first 2 Thanksgivings they'd invited me, stiff, awkward dinners, but I was there. After that, nothing. 3 years of being forgotten, of being told the gathering was small or just for us. They'd broken the condition, year by year, without even knowing it. The house, the land, the money, it was all mine. Not just mine to hold, but mine to control. I leaned back in the chair, the leather creaking under my weight. The room felt different now, sharper, like the air had cleared. I wasn't the outsider they'd made me feel. I was the one Malcolm had trusted, the one he'd chosen to carry his legacy. My eyes drifted to the photo on the desk. Me, Malcolm, Chris, and Lila, laughing at a picnic years ago. I'd been their mother in every way that mattered, and Malcolm had seen it. He'd known, somehow, that they might push me away. And he'd given me this. A way to take back what was mine. I stood, the envelope clutched in my hand, and walked to the window. The night was still, the trees swaying faintly in the breeze. I thought of Miranda's smirk, Chris's cold dismissal, Lila's averted gaze. They thought they could erase me, replace me with her, but they didn't know about the will. They didn't know about the clause. A strange calm settled over me, like the moment before a storm breaks. I didn't need to scream or beg for their respect. I had something stronger, Malcolm's words, etched in ink, backed by law. I pulled out my phone, opening the note I'd started earlier. "Miranda took Leo this afternoon. She says she brought him back. But did she?" I added another line. "The will, clause 4B. They broke it." My fingers hovered over the screen, steady now. I opened my email, searching for the lawyer Malcolm had trusted, Mr. Hargrove. His last message was years old, a condolence note after Malcolm's funeral. I typed a quick message. "Need to discuss Malcolm's will. Urgent. Can we meet tomorrow?" I hit send, the soft whoosh of the email cutting through the silence. I walked back to the living room, the envelope still in my hand. The house felt different now, not a museum of loss, but a fortress I could defend. I sank onto the couch, my eyes falling on Leo's empty bed. The ache for him was still there, raw and heavy, but it was tempered by something new, resolve. I didn't know where he was, but I'd find him, and I'd find a way to make them see me, not as the mother they discarded, but as the woman who held their future in her hands. I slipped the will back into the envelope, tucking it into my bag. Tomorrow I'd meet Hargrove. Tomorrow I'd start unraveling their lies. But tonight, I needed one more thing. I pulled out my phone again, opening a new email. The recipient, Miranda. The subject, something you should see. I attached a scanned copy of the will the clause highlighted. I didn't write a message. I didn't need to. The document spoke for itself. The video that went viral. The morning after I sent the email to Miranda, I woke to a quiet house, the kind of stillness that feels like the world is holding its breath. The Vermont dawn crept through the curtains, painting the living room in soft grays and blues. I lay on the couch, still in yesterday's sweater, the weight of the will's discovery anchoring me. Malcolm's words, "The estate shall revert solely to Valerie Walker," echoed in my mind, a lifeline I hadn't known I needed. My phone sat on the coffee table, its screen dark but heavy with the hours of audio I'd recorded at Chris's Thanksgiving. I hadn't listened to it yet. I wasn't ready to hear their laughter, their lies, captured in cold digital clarity. But I knew one thing. I wasn't the invisible woman they'd made me out to be. Not anymore. I stood, my joints stiff from the night, and shuffled to the kitchen. The air smelled faintly of yesterday's pie, now cold and forgotten in its dish. Leo's water bowl sat by the door, untouched, a silent accusation. I pressed my fingers to my temple, pushing back the ache of his absence. Where was he? The thought of him lost in the rain, alone, clawed at me, but I couldn't let it consume me, not now. I had a meeting with Mr. Hargrove, the lawyer, in a few hours. I needed to be sharp, focused. I brewed coffee, the bitter aroma grounding me, and checked my phone. No reply from Miranda. No surprise there. She was probably still sleeping off the wine, wrapped in my scarf, smug in her stolen place. I drove to town, the Vermont hills rolling past, their bare trees stark against the pale sky. The cafe where I'd meet Hargrove was a small, cozy place, its windows fogged with steam. I arrived early, claiming a corner table with a view of the street. The air smelled of fresh pastries and roasted beans, a warmth that felt foreign after last night's chill. I ordered a chamomile tea, my hands wrapping around the mug, the heat seeping into my palms. My phone buzzed, a notification from Chris's social media. I hesitated, then opened it. The video loaded slowly, the thumbnail showing their Thanksgiving table, candles flickering, plates piled high, Miranda at the center, radiant. The caption read, "Grateful for family, always." My stomach twisted. I pressed play, keeping the volume low. Chris's voice came through, polished and warm, toasting the mother who raised us. The camera panned to Miranda, her smile dazzling, then to Lila, laughing, and the cousin raising his glass. The scene was perfect, a portrait of joy. But I wasn't in it, not a trace of me, no mention of the pie, no nod to the woman who'd raised them. I felt the tea burn my throat as I swallowed, my eyes stinging. They'd posted this for the world to see, a lie polished to a shine. I set the phone down, my hands trembling. The cafe hummed around me, baristas calling orders, a couple chatting nearby, but I felt alone, adrift. I thought of the will, the clause that gave me power they didn't suspect. I thought of Miranda's smugness, Chris's dismissal, Lila's betrayal. And then, almost without thinking, I opened the video's comments. My fingers hovered over the keyboard, the cursor blinking. I typed, "Not invited," again. I didn't use my name, just a blank profile, a ghost in their perfect world. I hit post and watched the words appear, small but sharp, like a pebble in a still pond. Hargrove arrived, his gray suit crisp, his handshake firm. "Valerie," he said, his voice warm but professional. "It's been too long." We sat, and I slid the will across the table, the highlighted clause glowing under the cafe's soft lights. He read it carefully, his brow furrowing, then looked up. "This is airtight," he said. "Malcolm was thorough. If the family hasn't included you in Thanksgiving for 3 years, they've breached the condition. The estate, house, land, savings, is yours to control." I nodded, my voice steady. "I want to proceed, quietly." He jotted notes, promising to verify the will's authenticity and prepare the necessary documents. "You're sure?" he asked, his eyes searching mine. "This could change everything." "I'm sure," I said, my tone cold, final. I thought of Leo, of the empty chair, of Miranda wearing my scarf. They'd changed everything first. I left the cafe, the winter air biting my cheeks. My phone buzzed again, more notifications. I opened the app and my breath caught. The comment, "Not invited," again, had exploded. Strangers were replying, their words a flood of outrage and curiosity. Wait, who's this? The stepmom who raised them? Where's Valerie? She's in all the old photos. This family's fake as hell. The video, meant to showcase their perfect Thanksgiving, was unraveling. People were digging, posting screenshots of old family photos, me with Chris at his graduation, me teaching Lila to bake. The truth was surfacing, one comment at a time. I sat in my car, the engine idling, and scrolled through the chaos. A smile tugged at my lips, small but real. I hadn't shouted or begged. I dropped a single line, and it was enough to crack their facade. I sipped the last of my tea, now cold, and felt a strange thrill. Revenge didn't need to be loud. It could be this, a quiet spark that spread like wildfire. My phone buzzed again, a message from Miranda. "We need to talk, privately." Her words were clipped, no trace of her usual charm. She'd seen the comments, maybe even the email with the will. She was rattled. Good. I didn't reply. Instead, I opened my email and booked a flight to Maine, a place I'd always wanted to see, with its rocky coasts and endless skies. I switched my phone to airplane mode, the notifications silenced, and drove home to pack. A visit from the real mother. The Maine coast stretched before me, its rocky cliffs jagged against the gray November sky. I sat in a small cafe by the harbor, the scent of salt and coffee mingling in the air. My phone, still in airplane mode, lay face down on the table, its silence a shield against the storm I'd left behind in Vermont. The viral video, my anonymous comment, "Not invited," again, had done its work, cracking the facade of Chris and Miranda's perfect family. The will, with its hidden claws, was now in Mr. Hargrove's hands, its power waiting to be unleashed. I sipped my tea, the chamomile soothing the edges of my nerves. For the first time in years, I felt a spark of control, like I was finally holding the reins of my own story. But I wasn't naive. Miranda wouldn't let this go quietly. The cafe was quiet, its wooden tables worn smooth by years of fishermen and tourists. The window beside me was fogged with condensation, and I traced a finger through it, drawing absent circles. I'd come to Maine to breathe, to escape the weight of that Thanksgiving table, but my mind kept drifting back. Leo's empty bed, the scarf on Miranda's shoulders, Lila's averted gaze. They were ghosts I couldn't shake. I thought of the email I'd sent Miranda, the will attached like a silent grenade. Had she read it? Was she panicking or plotting? I didn't know, but the thought of her unease brought a flicker of satisfaction. Revenge, I was learning, could be as quiet as a whisper. My phone buzzed, a single vibration breaking my reverie. I flipped it over, the screen lighting up with another message from Miranda. "Valerie, we need to talk. I'm in Maine. Name a time and place." My pulse quickened. She'd tracked me down. How? I didn't know, but it wasn't surprising. Miranda always had a knack for inserting herself where she wasn't wanted. I stared at the message, my thumb hovering over the reply button. Part of me wanted to ignore her, to let her stew in her own fear, but another part, sharper, colder, wanted to see her face when she realized I wasn't the pushover she thought. I typed back, "Harbor Cafe, 2 p.m., don't be late." I hit send and leaned back, the chair creaking under me. The sea outside churned, waves crashing against the rocks, and I felt a strange kinship with its restless power. I wasn't the Valerie who'd stood in Chris's kitchen swallowing hurt. I was someone new, someone who'd learned to wield silence like a weapon. At exactly 2 p.m., the cafe door jingled and Miranda stepped in. She was impeccable as always, dark coat, hair swept into a low bun, my scarf still draped around her neck like a taunt. But her eyes betrayed her, darting nervously as she scanned the room. She spotted me and walked over, her heels clicking on the wooden floor. The other patrons, a few locals sipping coffee, barely glanced up, but I felt their presence, a quiet audience to whatever was about to unfold. "Valerie," she said, sliding into the chair across from me. Her voice was smooth, but there was a crack in it, a hint of strain. "Thank you for meeting me." I nodded, saying nothing, my hands folded around my mug. The steam curled upward, a fragile barrier between us. I studied her, the faint lines around her eyes, the tight set of her mouth. She was trying to play the gracious mother, the reasonable one, but I saw through it. She was scared. "I saw the comment on Chris's video," she began, her tone measured. "And the email, the will." She paused, waiting for me to react, but I stayed silent, my eyes steady on hers. She shifted, her fingers brushing the scarf. "I think there's been a misunderstanding. We're not trying to push you out, Valerie. You're important to the kids." "Important," I repeated, my voice low, almost a whisper. "Is that why there was no chair for me at Thanksgiving? Why Chris said it's for real family? Why you're wearing my scarf?" My words were calm, but each one landed like a stone. Her smile faltered, her hand freezing on the scarf. "This," she said, touching the fabric, her voice too bright. "I found it in the house. I didn't think it was a big deal." She laughed, a brittle sound, but I didn't laugh with her. I leaned forward, my gaze unyielding. "It was a gift from Malcolm," I said. "You knew that, just like you knew I raised Chris and Lila for 15 years while you were gone. And now you're back, rewriting their story, pretending you never left." My voice stayed even, but the air between us crackled. Her eyes widened just for a moment before she regained her composure. "Valerie, you're upset, and I get it," she said, leaning in, her tone softening, coaxing. "But let's not make this bigger than it is. The kids love you. They missed me, you know? I'm their mother. That's not something you can replace with a few years of baking pies." Her words were a jab, meant to wound, but I didn't flinch. I thought of the will, the clause that gave me power she couldn't touch. I thought of Leo, still missing, and the pie no one had eaten, and I smiled, a small, knowing smile that made her shift in her seat. "I don't need to replace you, Miranda," I said, my voice steady. "I raised them. I was there when you weren't, and Malcolm saw that. That's why he wrote the will the way he did." I paused, letting the words sink in. "You've read it, haven't you? The clause about Thanksgiving?" Her face tightened, her fingers clenching the scarf. "You're blowing this out of proportion," she said, her voice rising slightly. "Do you really think a piece of paper changes anything? The kids are loyal to me. They won't let you tear us apart over some old document." But her eyes betrayed her. She was grasping, trying to hold on to control. And then, in a moment of unguarded anger, she leaned closer, her voice dropping to a hiss. "You think a few memories will buy their loyalty? I'm their mother, Valerie. Blood wins." I sat back, my heart steady, my smile unwavering. Blood wins. She'd said it out loud, the truth she'd been dancing around. This wasn't about love or family. It was about power, about the inheritance she thought she could claim through Chris and Lila. I reached into my bag and pulled out a photocopy of the will, sliding it across the table. "Read it again," I said. "The clause is clear. They broke it. You broke it. And now the estate is mine." She stared at the paper, her hands trembling slightly. For a moment I saw the fear in her eyes, the realization that her carefully constructed return was crumbling. But she didn't touch the document. Instead, she stood, her chair scraping the floor, and forced a smile. "This isn't over, Valerie," she said, her voice tight. "You'll see." She turned and walked out, the door jingling behind her. I stayed at the table, the will lying untouched between us. The cafe hummed softly, the locals oblivious to the war that had just been waged in their midst. I sipped my tea, now lukewarm, and felt a strange calm settle over me. Miranda had called me Mrs. Walker as she left, a slip, a crack in her armor. She knew I wasn't just the stepmother anymore. I was the one with the power. Thanksgiving no more. The Maine air was sharp, carrying the bite of winter as I walked along the harbor, the sea churning gray and restless. My meeting with Miranda at the cafe lingered like a bruise. Her hissed words, "Blood wins," and the way she'd faltered when I slid the will across the table. Calling me Mrs. Walker had been her mistake, a crack in her polished armor. I'd left the cafe with the photocopied will in my bag, its weight a quiet reassurance. The estate, Malcolm's house, the land, the savings, was mine, secured by a clause they'd unknowingly broken. But it wasn't enough to know I'd won. I needed them to feel it, to see the cost of their betrayal. Not with screams or tears, but with the cold, unyielding truth. Back at my rented cottage, the walls creaked under the wind's assault, the fireplace casting flickering shadows. I sat at the small wooden table, my laptop open, the screen glowing with the fallout of Chris's viral Thanksgiving video. The comments had grown fiercer, strangers dissecting their perfect family. Where's the stepmom who raised them? Why's Miranda acting like she was always there? My single comment, not invited, again, had sparked a fire I hadn't anticipated. I didn't add more. I didn't need to. The internet was doing the work, peeling back their lies layer by layer. My phone buzzed, a message from Chris. My heart stuttered, but I opened it, expecting anger or excuses. Instead, his words were soft, almost desperate. "Valerie, if you still love us, please don't do this. Don't sue. We can fix this." I stared at the screen, the words blurring. Love. He dared to use that word after shoving me into the kitchen, after calling Miranda the mother who raised them. I set the phone down, my hands steady, and leaned back in the chair. The fire crackled, its warmth doing little to ease the ice in my chest. Love didn't mean letting them walk over me. Not anymore. I thought of Lila, her guilty glances at the Thanksgiving table, and Chris, his cold dismissal when I'd said Leo was missing. I thought, aught Thanksgiving, no more. The Maine air was sharp, carrying the bite of winter as I walked along the harbor, the sea churning gray and restless. My meeting with Miranda at the cafe lingered like a bruise, her hissed words, blood wins, and the way she'd faltered when I slid the will across the table. Calling me Mrs. Walker had been her mistake, a crack in her polished armor. I'd left the cafe with the photocopied will in my bag, its weight a quiet reassurance. The estate, Malcolm's house, the land, the savings, was mine, secured by a clause they'd unknowingly broken. But it wasn't enough to know I'd won. I needed them to feel it, to see the cost of their betrayal, not with screams or tears, but with the cold, unyielding truth. Back at my rented cottage, the walls creaked under the wind's assault, the fireplace casting flickering shadows across the rough pine floor. I sat at the small wooden table, my laptop open, the screen glowing with the fallout of Chris's viral Thanksgiving video. The comments had grown fiercer, strangers dissecting their perfect family. Where's the stepmom who raised them? Why's Miranda acting like she was always there? My single comment, not invited, again, had sparked a fire I hadn't anticipated. I didn't add more. I didn't need to. The internet was doing the work, peeling back their lies layer by layer. My phone buzzed, a message from Chris lighting up the screen. My heart stuttered, but I opened it, expecting anger or excuses. Instead, his words were soft, almost desperate. "Valerie, if you still love us, please don't do this. Don't sue. We can fix this." I stared at the screen, the words blurring as the fire's warmth pressed against my skin. Love. He dared to use that word after shoving me into the kitchen, after calling Miranda the mother who raised them. I set the phone down, my hands steady, and leaned back in the chair. The wind howled outside, rattling the windows, and I felt a strange kinship with its fury. Love didn't mean letting them walk over me. Not anymore. I closed my eyes, the memory of that Thanksgiving table flooding back, the candlelight glinting off Miranda's stolen scarf, the clink of glasses as Chris toasted her, Lila's averted gaze when I'd stood in the doorway, unseen. I'd spent 15 years loving them, bandaging Chris's scraped knees, teaching Lila to braid her hair, sitting up late with Malcolm when the cancer took hold. I'd poured my soul into this family, and they'd erased me, piece by piece. The scarf, the photo above the fireplace, even Leo's loyalty, all gone. But the will was mine, and with it, the power to rewrite the story they thought they controlled. I stood, my slippers scuffing the floor, and walked to the window. The harbor was a dark smudge beyond the glass, the waves crashing in a rhythm that matched the pulse in my ears. I thought of Lila, her guilty glances at the table, and Chris, his cold dismissal when I'd said Leo was missing. I thought of Miranda, her smug assurance that blood would win. They thought they could beg or bargain their way out of this, but they didn't know me, not the woman I'd become. I picked up my phone and typed a reply to Chris, my fingers deliberate. Love doesn't mean being used. I hit send, the soft chime cutting through the cottage's silence. The fire popped, sending a shower of sparks up the chimney. I sat again, pulling my sweater tighter around me. The cottage smelled of pine and sea salt, a stark contrast to the Vermont house's warm wood and Leo's faint fur scent. I missed him, the way his paws clicked on the floor, the way he'd nudge my hand when I was lost in thought. His absence was a wound, raw and aching, but I couldn't let it derail me. I opened my laptop again, checking my email. A message from Mr. Hargrove waited, brief and to the point. Will verified. Clause 4B is enforceable. I've drafted a notice to freeze the estate's accounts, awaiting your approval. I read it twice, my breath steady. This was it, the moment I'd stop being the invisible stepmother. I leaned back, my mind drifting to a memory of Malcolm years ago, sitting at his desk in the study. He'd been drafting the will, his glasses slipping down his nose, his voice gentle but firm. Val, this is for you, he'd said, tapping the paper, just in case. I hadn't understood then, hadn't wanted to imagine a world without him, but now I saw it, his foresight, his trust. He'd known the kids might drift, that Miranda might return. He'd given me this clause, this shield, to protect what we'd built together. I pressed my fingers to my lips, a silent thank you to the man who'd loved me enough to see me, even when I couldn't see myself. My phone buzzed again, this time a call from Chris. I let it ring, watching the screen light up with his name. The fire's glow danced on the walls, and I pictured him pacing in his living room, the same room where he'd dismissed me. The call went to voicemail, and a moment later, a text appeared. Valerie, please, call me back. I didn't. Instead, I opened Hargrove's email and typed, send the notice, freeze the accounts. I hit send, the decision settling over me like a cloak. No turning back now. Hours later, another message from Chris, this one longer, more frantic. You're really doing this? You're going to take everything? What about Lila? What about me? I read it, my heart twisting but not breaking. I thought of the nights I'd cooked for them, the ginger soup I'd made when Chris had the flu, the way he'd hugged me then, his fever-hot cheek against my shoulder. You're the best, Val, he'd said, his voice small. Where was that boy now? Buried under years of ingratitude, replaced by a man who thought a chair in the kitchen was enough for me. I stood, pacing the cottage, my slippers whispering against the floor. The wind outside had calmed, leaving a heavy silence. I stopped at the window, my reflection faint in the glass. Silver hair, sharp eyes, a woman who'd learned to stand tall. I typed a reply to Chris, my words deliberate, each one a stone in the wall I was building. Do you remember the ginger soup I made when you had the flu? You said it was the best thing you'd ever tasted. I stayed up all night to keep you comfortable. That's love, Chris, not this. I sent it and turned off the phone, the screen going dark. The next morning, I woke to an email from Hargrove. Notice sent, accounts frozen, court filing in progress. I read it over coffee, the mug's warmth steadying my hands. The process had begun, a legal machine grinding forward, unstoppable. I imagined Chris's face when he got the news, Lila's confusion, Miranda's rage. They'd thought they could keep me in the shadows, but the shadows were mine now, and I was stepping into the light. I walked to the harbor, the air crisp, the gulls crying overhead. The sea was calmer today, its surface glinting under a weak sun. I thought of Leo, wondering if he was out there somewhere, lost or stolen. I thought of the house, its oak table and creaking stairs, now legally mine. And I thought of Malcolm, his quiet strength guiding me still. The fight wasn't over. Miranda would push back, Chris would beg, Lila might waver, but I was ready. I'd been kind for too long, and kindness had cost me everything. Now, I'd let the truth do the talking. The house that wasn't theirs. The main cottage felt like a fortress now, its creaking walls and salt-stained windows shielding me from the chaos I'd unleashed. I sat at the small table, the morning light filtering through the fog, a mug of coffee cooling in my hands. The email from Mr. Hargrove glowed on my laptop screen. Estate accounts frozen. Court filing processed. Notice of intent to transfer ownership of the Vermont property to Valerie Walker sent to all parties. The words were cold, legal, final. Malcolm's will, with its forgotten clause, had done its work. The house, the one I'd scrubbed, loved, and filled with memories, was mine, not theirs. Chris, Lila, Miranda, they'd built their betrayal on a foundation that never belonged to them. And now they were losing it. I leaned back, the chair groaning under my weight, and let the moment settle. The sea outside churned, its rhythm steady, like the pulse of my resolve. I'd spent 15 years being the mother they needed, the wife Malcolm deserved, the keeper of a home they'd taken for granted. I'd stood in their kitchen, pie in hand, while they toasted Miranda as their real family. I'd called for Leo in the rain, my voice unanswered, but now the tide had turned. The will was my weapon, and I wielded it with a precision they hadn't expected. My phone, no longer in airplane mode, buzzed relentlessly. Messages from Chris piled up, each one more desperate. "Valerie, you can't do this. That house is our home. Please, let's talk. You're tearing us apart." I read them without replying, my heart a strange mix of steel and sorrow. I remembered Chris at 16, his lanky frame hunched over the oak table, my hand on his shoulder as he cried over a failed exam. "You're tougher than this," I told him, and he'd nodded, his eyes bright with trust. Where was that boy now? Lost to a man who'd pushed me out, who'd chosen Miranda's lies over my truth. I stood, my slippers scuffing the cottage's worn floor, and walked to the window. The harbor was cloaked in mist, the gulls silent for once. I thought of Lila, her quiet guilt at the Thanksgiving table, her soft voice calling Miranda, Mom. I thought of the scarf, Malcolm's gift, now a trophy around Miranda's neck, and I thought of Leo, his absence a wound that refused to heal. The house was mine, yes, but it felt empty without him, without the life we'd built. I pressed my fingers to the cool glass, my breath fogging the pain. This wasn't just about winning. It was about reclaiming what they'd stolen, piece by piece. A new email arrived, this one from Miranda. No pleasantries, no charm. "You think you've won, but you're wrong. That house belongs to my children, not you. I'll fight this in court." Her words were sharp, but I sensed the panic beneath them. She'd read the will, seen the clause, and knew she was on shaky ground. I didn't reply. Instead, I forwarded the email to Hargrove with a single line, "Let her try." I imagined her pacing her hotel room, her perfect composure cracking, the scarf slipping from her shoulders. The thought brought a flicker of satisfaction, small but bright, like a spark in the dark. I needed to return to Vermont. The court process was moving, but I had to face the house, to stand in its rooms and feel its weight as mine. I booked a flight for the next morning, my fingers steady on the keyboard. The cottage felt smaller now, its walls closing in, urging me to move. I packed my bag slowly, folding sweaters, tucking the will into a side pocket. My phone buzzed again, a voicemail from Lila this time. I hesitated, then played it, her voice soft and trembling. "Valerie, I'm sorry, I didn't mean for this to happen. Can we talk? Please?" I listened twice, searching for sincerity, but all I heard was fear. She wasn't sorry for me, she was sorry for herself, for the house slipping through their fingers. I drove to the airport at dawn, the Maine coast fading behind me. The flight was short, the Vermont hills coming into view, their bare trees stark against the pale sky. Landing felt like stepping back into a battlefield. I rented a car and drove to the house, the familiar gravel road crunching under the tires. The sight of it, red brick, white shutters, the oak tree where Leo used to nap, hit me harder than I expected. This was my home, but it felt like a stranger's now, haunted by memories and betrayals. I parked and stepped out, the air cold, smelling of frost and pine. The front door was unlocked, a careless habit Chris had never shaken. I pushed it open, the hinges creaking, and stepped inside. The living room was untouched, the oak table gleaming, the fireplace cold. Leo's bed sat by the hearth, a faint dent where he'd last curled up. I knelt beside it, my fingers brushing the worn fabric, and felt a pang so sharp it stole my breath. "Where are you, boy?" I whispered, my voice breaking. The silence was deafening, but I didn't cry. I'd cried enough. I walked to the study, Malcolm's thinking den, and sat at his desk. The manila envelope with the will was still there, its edges yellowed but its power intact. I opened it, rereading the clause. Should the family fail to uphold the tradition of Thanksgiving, the estate shall revert solely to Valerie Walker. Malcolm had seen this coming, hadn't he? He'd known they might push me out, that Miranda might slither back. I traced his handwriting, my fingers lingering on the ink. "You knew," I murmured, a quiet thank you to the man who'd loved me enough to protect me. Footsteps broke the silence, heavy, deliberate. I turned, my heart lurching, to see Chris in the doorway. His face was drawn, his eyes red like he hadn't slept. "Valerie," he said, his voice rough, "you're really doing this? Taking the house?" He stepped closer, his hands clenched. "This is our home, Dad's home. You can't just steal it." I stood, the will in my hand, my voice calm but unyielding. "I'm not stealing anything, Chris. You broke the will. You, Lila Miranda, you pushed me out. Thanksgiving was supposed to include me, and you made sure it didn't." I held up the document, the clause glowing under the desk lamp. "Malcolm wrote this for a reason. He trusted me to keep this family together. You're the ones who tore it apart." His jaw tightened, but he didn't argue. He looked at the floor, his shoulders slumping. "We didn't mean to hurt you," he said, almost a whisper. "It just happened. Miranda's our mom. She's back now." "Back," I repeated, my voice sharp. "She left you when you were 6, Chris. I was there. I raised you. And you thanked me by giving me a chair in the kitchen." My words hung between us, heavy and true. He flinched, but I didn't stop. "This house is mine now. The court will decide the rest." He stared at me, his eyes searching for the Valerie who'd once let things slide. She was gone. "You're not my mother," he said finally, his voice low, cruel. "You never were." I didn't flinch. I'd heard worse from Miranda. "Maybe not," I said, my tone cold. "But I was your family, and you forgot that." I turned away, signaling the conversation was over. He lingered for a moment, then left, the door slamming behind him. I stood in the study, the will still in my hand, the house quiet around me. It wasn't theirs anymore. It was mine, every creak, every memory, every inch, and I'd make sure they knew it. The travel bag with no regrets. The Vermont house stood silent around me, its familiar creaks and shadows no longer a comfort, but a reminder of what I'd lost and what I'd reclaimed. I stood in the living room, the oak table gleaming under the morning light, Leo's empty bed a quiet ache by the hearth. Chris's words from yesterday, "You're not my mother," echoed in my mind, sharp but strangely freeing. He'd meant to wound me, but instead he'd cut the last thread of guilt holding me back. The house was mine, the will's clause a legal fortress, and I was done begging for their love. I'd spent 15 years giving them everything, my time, my heart, my home, and they'd given me a chair in the kitchen. Now I was ready to walk away, not as a victim, but as the woman who'd won. I walked upstairs, my footsteps heavy on the worn stairs, and entered my bedroom. The air smelled of lavender and old wood, a scent that used to soothe me. My travel bag sat in the corner, a sturdy leather thing Malcolm had bought for our first trip together, a weekend in Boston, laughing over lobster rolls. I pulled it onto the bed, the zippers rasp loud in the quiet. I didn't know where I was going yet, but I knew I couldn't stay. Not in this house, not in this life they'd tried to erase me from. I folded sweaters, socks, a pair of jeans, each item a small act of defiance. I wasn't running. I was choosing myself. My phone buzzed on the nightstand, a message from Mr. Hargrove. "Court has upheld the will. Property transfer to your name is complete, awaiting your instructions for the estate." I read it twice, my breath steady, the weight of the words sinking in. The house, the land, the savings, they were mine, not just in theory, but in law. I imagined Miranda's face when she heard, her smugness crumbling, her stolen scarf no longer a trophy. I imagined Chris and Lila scrambling to salvage their inheritance, their real family myth shattered. A smile tugged at my lips, small but real. I didn't reply to Hargrove yet. I needed to feel this moment first, to let it settle like frost on the Vermont hills. I paused at the dresser, my fingers brushing a framed photo. Me, Malcolm, Chris, and Lila at a summer fair, cotton candy staining Lila's grin. I'd been their mother in every way that mattered, and Malcolm had seen it. His will wasn't just a document, it was his promise, his trust. I tucked the photo into the bag, not out of sentiment, but as a reminder. I'd loved fiercely, and I'd survived their betrayal. I added the manila envelope with the will, its edges worn, but its power intact. It was my shield, my proof, and I wouldn't let it out of my sight. Downstairs, I stood in the kitchen, the linoleum cool under my socks. The pumpkin pie I'd made for Lila sat on the counter, its crust cracked, untouched since that night. I stared at it, remembering her childhood giggles as she stole spoonfuls of filling, her small hand in mine. Those memories used to warm me, but now they stung, tainted by her silence at the Thanksgiving table, her soft "Mom for Miranda." I grabbed the pie and dumped it into the trash, the dish clattering in the sink. The sound was final, like a door slamming shut. I didn't need her love anymore. I didn't need any of them. I walked to the study, Malcolm's thinking den, and sat at his desk. The air was stale, the shelves heavy with his old law books, their spines cracked from years of use. I opened my laptop, the screen glowing with notifications. The viral video's comments had grown into a storm. Strangers now tagging Chris and Lila, demanding answers. What did you do to Valerie? She raised you and you cut her out? My single comment, not invited, again, had become a rallying cry, a spark that lit the truth on fire. I didn't add to it. The world was speaking for me now. A new email caught my eye, this one from an unknown address. Valerie, I know where Leo is. Meet me at the old barn on Route 12 tomorrow, 3 p.m. Come alone. My heart lurched, the words blurring for a moment. Leo. The name alone was a wound, raw and aching. I hadn't seen him since that rainy night, hadn't heard his eager bark or felt his fur under my fingers. Was this real or a trap? Miranda's face flashed in my mind, her cold smile, her hissed, "Blood wins." Could she be behind this, luring me to weaken my resolve? I forwarded the email to Hargrove with a note. Check this, could be a setup. Then I leaned back, my pulse racing but my mind clear. Trap or not, I'd go. For Leo, I'd risk anything. I stood, grabbing my coat, and walked outside. The Vermont air was crisp, the grass brittle with frost. I circled the house, my boots crunching, and stopped at the oak tree where Leo used to nap. I knelt, my fingers brushing the cold earth, and whispered, "I'm coming, boy." The wind carried my words away, but I felt them settle, a vow I wouldn't break. I thought of Malcolm, his quiet strength, and felt him with me, guiding me through this storm. I wasn't the woman who'd stood in Chris's kitchen swallowing hurt. I was Valerie Walker, and I was done being invisible. Back inside, I packed the last of my things. My phone, the will, a notebook where I'd jotted my thoughts. Miranda took Leo. The will was broken. They chose her. I zipped the bag, its weight solid in my hand. The house was mine, but it wasn't home anymore. It was a battlefield, a trophy, a reminder of what I'd fought for. I'd leave it behind, not because I had to, but because I wanted to. I'd find Leo, and then I'd start over, somewhere new, with no regrets. I locked the front door, the key cold in my palm, and walked to the car. The hills stretched before me, their bare trees stark against the pale sky. My phone buzzed, one last message from Lila. "Valerie, I'm sorry. I didn't know about the will. Can we fix this?" I read it, my heart unmoved. Sorry wasn't enough. Not after the chair in the kitchen, not after Leo's absence, not after they'd chosen Miranda's lies. I didn't reply. I tossed the phone onto the passenger seat and started the engine, the rumble drowning out the silence. Tomorrow I'd go to the barn. Tomorrow I'd face whatever waited, Leo or another betrayal. But tonight I drove, the road unfolding like a promise. I wasn't running. I was moving forward, my bag packed, my heart steady. They'd thought they could erase me, but they'd only made me stronger. The son who called too late. The Vermont dusk settled over the old barn on Route 12, its weathered boards creaking in the wind. I stood in the gravel lot, my boots crunching against the frost-kissed ground, my travel bag slung over my shoulder. The email from the unknown sender, Valerie, I know where Leo is. Come alone, had brought me here, a flicker of hope tangled with suspicion. Was Leo really waiting, or was this Miranda's trap, her last attempt to claw back control? The air smelled of damp hay and diesel, the fading light casting long shadows across the field. My phone, still recording in my pocket, was my only witness. I'd left the house behind, its oak table and empty rooms now legally mine, but Leo was the one piece of my past I couldn't let go. I checked my watch, 3:02 p.m. The barn loomed, its doors ajar, a sliver of darkness within. I took a step forward, my breath fogging in the cold. When a low whine cut through the silence, my heart leapt. "Leo?" I called, my voice sharp, echoing off the wood. The whine came again, faint but unmistakable. I dropped my bag and ran, the gravel skidding under my boots, my coat flapping. I pushed through the doors, the scent of mildew and straw hitting me, and there he was. Leo, tied to a post, his fur matted, but his tail thumping weakly. His brown eyes met mine, and I fell to my knees, my hands trembling as I untied the rope. "Oh, boy," I whispered, burying my face in his fur. He licked my cheek, his warmth real, alive. Tears stung my eyes, but I didn't care. I had him back. I checked him over, my fingers gentle on his ribs, his paws. He was thinner, a little shaky, but unharmed. "Who did this to you?" I murmured, my voice thick. The barn was empty, no sign of the sender, no trap waiting. Just Leo, left here like a discarded toy. I thought of Miranda's cold smile, her casual dismissal when I'd said he was missing. Had she done this? Locked him away to hurt me? I pulled out my phone, adding a note. Found Leo in the barn. Tied up. Miranda? I stood, helping Leo to his feet, his leash clipped to my belt. "We're going home," I told him, though I didn't know where home was anymore. Back at the car, I wrapped Leo in a blanket from the trunk, his warmth grounding me. My phone buzzed, a call from Chris. I stared at the screen, his name a jolt after weeks of silence. Part of me wanted to ignore it, to let him stew in the wreckage of his choices. The frozen accounts, the house now mine, the viral video exposing their lies. But curiosity, or maybe the lingering echo of the boy I'd raised, made me answer. I put the call on speaker, Leo's soft snores filling the car. "Valerie," Chris's voice crackled, strained like he'd been shouting. "Thank God you picked up. I messed up. We all did. Please, can we talk?" He sounded older, worn, not the confident man who'd dismissed me at Thanksgiving. I stayed silent, my fingers brushing Leo's fur, waiting. He rushed on, his words tumbling. "I saw the court papers, the house, the money. It's all yours now. I didn't know about the will, I swear. Miranda pushed us, said it was her right, but I should have fought for you. You were always there, Val. I'm sorry." I leaned back, the car's leather creaking, the Vermont hills fading into twilight beyond the windshield. Sorry. The word was too small, too late. I thought of the ginger soup I'd made when he was sick, the nights I'd driven him to soccer practice, the way he'd hugged me at Malcolm's funeral, his tears soaking my shoulder. I'd loved him like my own, and he'd chosen Miranda, chosen a chair in the kitchen for me. "You're sorry," I said finally, my voice low, steady. "Do you know what that means, Chris? I raised you for 15 years. I was your mother in every way that mattered, and you let her erase me." He choked, a sound like a sob. "I know," he said. "I know. Lila's a mess too. She wants to fix this. We both do. Please, Val, don't cut us out. We're family. Family." The word stung, a reminder of his cold. Thanksgiving is for real family. I looked at Leo, his eyes half closed, trusting me completely. He was my family now, not them. You had your chance, I said, my tone cold but not cruel. You chose Miranda. You chose to leave me out. The house is mine, Chris. The will is clear, and I'm done waiting for you to see me. I paused, letting the words sink in. I found Leo today. He was tied up in a barn alone. Did you know about that? Did Miranda? He gasped, his voice breaking. No, God, no, Val, I didn't. Miranda said he ran off. I swear I didn't know. I believed him, but it didn't change anything. His ignorance was its own betrayal. I ended the call, the silence heavy, final. My phone buzzed again. A text from Lila. Valerie, I'm so sorry. I didn't know about Leo. Please call me. I didn't reply. I was tired of their apologies, their too-late regrets. I started the car, the engine's rumble soothing Leo's soft whines. I drove, the road stretching into the dusk, my travel bag in the back, the will tucked safely inside. I didn't know where I was going. Maybe back to Maine, maybe somewhere new. The house was mine, a victory I'd earned, but it wasn't home anymore. Home was Leo's warmth beside me, the open road ahead, the freedom to choose my own path. I thought of Malcolm, his quiet strength in the will's words, and felt him with me, nodding approval. I'd fought for what was mine, and I'd won. Chris's call had come too late. He'd seen the truth, my comment on the video, the court's ruling, the internet's outrage. But it wasn't enough. I wasn't the woman who'd stood in their kitchen, swallowing hurt. I was Valerie Walker, and I was free. The Thanksgiving that was finally hers. The Maine coast stretched before me, its cliffs sharp against a pale November sky, the sea a restless gray that mirrored my quiet resolve. I stood outside a small rented cabin, the air crisp with salt and pine, Leo at my side, his fur warm against my leg. His tail thumped softly, a rhythm of trust that grounded me. I'd found him, saved him from that barn on Route 12, and now he was here, my one true family. The Vermont house was mine, legally, irrevocably, its oak table, creaking stairs, and memories secured by Malcolm's will. Chris's too-late apology, Lila's tearful texts, Miranda's defeated silence, they were echoes of a past I'd left behind. Today was Thanksgiving, my first in years without their betrayal, and I was ready to claim it for myself. The cabin's porch creaked under my boots as I carried a tray of food inside, a modest spread, nothing like the lavish dinners I'd once slaved over. A roasted chicken, golden and fragrant, sat beside a bowl of mashed potatoes flecked with rosemary. A small pumpkin pie, its crust imperfect but honest, cooled on the counter, its cinnamon scent curling through the air. I'd baked it for me, not Lila, not them. Leo sniffed the air, his nose twitching, and I laughed, a sound that felt new, unburdened. Not yet, boy, I said, scratching his ears. The cabin was warm, the fireplace crackling, its light dancing on the wooden walls. This was my table, my home, my Thanksgiving. I set the table for one, a single plate, a single glass, a single chair. No one would push me to the kitchen. No one would toast a mother who wasn't me. I poured a glass of wine, the ruby liquid catching the fire's glow, and sat down. The silence was soft, not heavy, filled with the hum of the sea and Leo's gentle snores. I closed my eyes, letting the moment settle. 15 years of Thanksgivings flashed through my mind, Chris's laughter as he stole turkey, Lila's shy smile over her pie, Malcolm's hand squeezing mine under the table. I'd loved them fiercely, given them everything, and they'd repaid me with a chair in the shadows. But I wasn't that woman anymore. I was Valerie Walker, and I'd fought for this moment. My phone sat on the counter, its screen dark. I'd turned off notifications after Chris's call, after Lila's texts, after the internet storm had quieted. The viral video, my comment, not invited, again, had done its work, exposing their lies to the world. The court had upheld the will, the house and estate were mine, and Miranda's threats had crumbled. I didn't need to check the comments or answer their pleas. I'd won, not with screams but with the quiet power of truth. I sipped my wine, its warmth spreading through me, and felt Malcolm's presence, his trust in me sealed in that clause. "You did it, Val," I imagined him saying, his voice soft, proud. I carved the chicken, the knife slicing cleanly, and served myself a portion. The potatoes were creamy, the rosemary sharp on my tongue. I ate slowly, savoring each bite, the fire's heat on my face. Leo lifted his head, his eyes hopeful, and I slipped him a small piece of chicken, his tail wagging furiously. "We're okay, boy," I said, my voice steady. I thought of the barn, the rope around his neck, the empty silence when I'd called for him that night. I'd never know for sure if Miranda had tied him there, but I didn't need to. She'd lost her smugness, her stolen scarf, her claim to my family. I'd taken it all back. Halfway through dinner, a knock came at the door, soft but insistent. Leo's ears perked, a low growl rumbling in his throat. I froze, my fork hovering, my pulse quickening. I wasn't expecting anyone. The cabin was remote, tucked away from the main road, known only to the rental agency in Hargrove. I set the fork down, my movements deliberate, and stood, wiping my hands on a napkin. Leo followed me to the door, his presence a quiet strength. I opened it a crack, the cold air rushing in, and saw Lila standing there, her coat dusted with frost, her eyes red and swollen. "Valerie," she said, her voice trembling. "Please, can I come in?" She looked small, fragile, not the poised young woman who'd sat at Chris's table. I hesitated, my hand on the doorframe, Leo pressing against my leg. Part of me wanted to slam the door, to keep this Thanksgiving mine, but another part, the part that remembered her childhood giggles, her hand in mine, softened, just enough to listen. "Why are you here, Lila?" I asked, my tone calm but unyielding. The wind whistled behind her, tugging at her scarf. Not mine, not Miranda's, just hers. I had to see you," she said, her breath fogging. "I'm so sorry, Valerie, for everything, the dinner, the video, Leo. I didn't know what Miranda was doing. I didn't know about the will." Her words spilled out, frantic, but I didn't move. I thought of her silence that night, her soft, "Mom," for Miranda, the way she'd let me stand alone. "Sorry doesn't fix it," I said, my voice low. "You chose her, Lila. You let her erase me. 15 years, and you gave me nothing." My words were steady, each one a stone I'd carried too long. She flinched, tears spilling down her cheeks, but I didn't soften. I couldn't. "I know," she whispered. "I was wrong. I see it now. You were my mom, Valerie, not her. Please let me make it right." She stepped forward, her hands outstretched, but Leo growled, low and firm. I placed a hand on his head, calming him, my eyes never leaving hers. "You can't make it right," I said. "The house is mine. The will is done, and I'm done waiting for you to love me." I paused, letting the truth settle. "Go home, Lila. Find your own Thanksgiving." I closed the door, the latch clicking softly, and leaned against it, my breath uneven. Her muffled sobs faded as she walked away, the crunch of her footsteps swallowed by the wind. I returned to the table, my plate still warm, the fire still burning. Leo settled at my feet, his warmth a quiet anchor. I picked up my fork, my hands steady, and took another bite. The chicken was tender, the pie waiting for me, the wine still rich. This was my Thanksgiving, not theirs. I didn't need their apologies, their guilt, their too-late love. I had Leo, the sea, the house, and myself, stronger than they'd ever know. I raised my glass, a silent toast to Malcolm, to the woman I'd become. The fire crackled, the waves crashed outside, and I smiled, truly smiled, for the first time in years. They'd tried to break me, but I'd risen, whole and free.